Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our own image, in our likeness." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Good evening. We are here today to celebrate the legacy of the Declaration of Independence. So it might seem a little bit odd to some of you that I opened my discussion of this political document with a quote from the Bible. And not just any quote from the Bible, but from the very beginning, from some of the first words that Moses would have written. And that's because there is a connection between those words and the Declaration of Independence. Over 3,000 years separate those ancient words from the scratching of Thomas Jefferson's quill, but the relationship between them is close and undeniable. Tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that relationship. I'm going to trace it historically over its 3,000-year journey into the Declaration of Independence. It won't take me that long to do it, though, promise. Okay, so a lot of you recognize the quote that I started with from the Bible. It's from Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. And those words speak of the creation of mankind, literally bringing human beings into existence. But those words brought something else into existence as well. They brought into existence possibly the most important concept to ever be in human history, and that is the concept of Imago Dei. Imago Dei is a Latin phrase which means image of God, and it's taken directly from that line in Genesis. So God created mankind in his image. And I'm not a priest or a pastor or a minister of any kind. I'm just an historian and a teacher. And so I will leave it to someone else smarter than myself to talk about the importance of Imago Dei to the foundations of Christianity. However, a lot of Americans don't really understand the importance of Imago Dei to the foundations of this nation. And you can draw a straight line directly from "so God created mankind in his image" to "they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." And that line looks like this. It begins in Genesis. It runs through the ancient philosophers like Aristotle and Cicero, through St. Thomas Aquinas, to John Locke, and finally to Thomas Jefferson. Now, of course, there are many dozens, maybe even hundreds of philosophers and thinkers in between there that brought this idea of Imago Dei to where it is today. But those are the big four. I'm going to say them again: Aristotle, Aquinas, Locke, and Jefferson. Those are the ones who really took the intellectual leaps that eventually bring this religious concept and fuse it into the political order to bring us to the place where we are today, a place where you and I can openly assemble and worship in the freest nation that God has ever given mankind. So let's talk about how we got to that place. I already talked about the role that Genesis plays. That's where Imago Dei was first spoken into existence. Then ancient philosophers like Aristotle and Cicero, they developed a concept known as natural law. Natural law is the idea that there is an unwritten moral code that we all know, we're all connected to, and we all instinctively understand. It's the reason why we all know that certain things are right and certain things are wrong, even though we don't have to be told them first. That's natural law in a nutshell. But those ancient philosophers who developed that concept of natural law were pagans. And so they didn't have the knowledge of the Bible. They certainly didn't have knowledge of Christianity, since Christianity didn't even exist yet. And so their natural moral law was based on human reason. And human reason is imperfect. It is fallible. Natural law, when it was first developed, was not connected to God and the Bible. That connection was provided by St. Thomas Aquinas. So about 1,000 years after Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas reads Aristotle and he says, you know, you were really onto something here, but you didn't take it quite far enough because you didn't have the benefit of biblical truth. So Aquinas says, who has the benefit of biblical truth, Aquinas says that human reason that Aristotle and Cicero talked about, that human reason that enables us to perceive the natural law, that is God inside of us. So Thomas Aquinas said that human reason is the divine peace that God places in each one of us at our very creation, that divine peace that we didn't earn and can't be taken away from us. Now, in the 1200s, when Thomas Aquinas said this, that was absolutely explosive. The fact that human beings, by just virtue of being human, had an inherent dignity. A slave has it, a conquered people has it, a poor person has it, a criminal has it. So what Aquinas did was he built a philosophical bridge between the old secular philosophy of natural law to Imago Dei, to the image, mankind being made in the image of God. About 400 years later, in 1689, John Locke steps onto that bridge built by Thomas Aquinas, and he says, how can I apply this natural human dignity to the society that we all have to live in and function in every day, a society with laws and government and tyranny and injustice? How can I apply that? And John Locke's answer is, well, if your dignity comes directly from God, then you must also have rights that came directly from God that no king, no government, no majority vote can ever strip from you. Because if they could strip those rights from you, then they would be stripping away your divine dignity, which is, of course, impossible, because no earthly power could possibly strip you of something granted to you by God. Do you see John Locke's logic? Do you see how brilliant it is? So what Locke is saying is that Imago Dei doesn't just make you and I spiritually significant. It makes our human dignity legally untouchable by man. So let's sum up where we are before we end with, we have one more person to get to. First, it begins in the Bible. So Genesis asserts the Imago Dei, God being made in man's image. Then ancient philosophers like Aristotle and Cicero developed this moral order called natural law. Then Thomas Aquinas comes along and takes the two of those and he merges them together into this one universal concept. And then John Locke comes and stamps natural rights on top of all of it. It's a beautiful, elegant puzzle. And the final piece to that puzzle is a young farmer from Virginia named Thomas Jefferson, who isn't even a Christian. But he takes these 3,000 years of thought and he synthesizes it all together, all down to the most powerful political words ever put to paper. All men are created equal. Such a simple statement, but so powerful that it has been reverberating around this planet for the next 250 years. Breaking chains, restoring hope, bringing tyrants to their knees. Every oppressed people who has ever stood up against tyranny and injustice has done so by using the language first written into the political order in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on July 4th, 1776. Do you see how the Declaration can't even really exist without Imago Dei? It's what gives it its teeth. The Declaration of Independence is not just some secular document that has religious decorations around it. The religious premise of it is the point. The word unalienable only actually means anything if there is a supreme grantor of those rights, whose authority supersedes government. And that is our inheritance as Americans. It is the thing that we have been given and that we are duty-bound to protect. thousands of years of human civilization, thousands of years of tyranny, oppression, slavery, thousands of years of trial and error trying to get it right, all came down to that one world-changing moment when the founders said, there is a better way. And they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to give it to us. I'm going to leave you with a little story. One of our great presidents, Abraham Lincoln, you've all heard of him. Abraham Lincoln wrote something very beautiful about the Declaration of Independence, but unfortunately it's something that nobody's ever heard of. I can almost guarantee you that when you walk out of here, you will be some of the only people you know who knows this little piece of history that I'm going to tell you. Because when he wrote this about the Declaration, he just jotted it down as a note to himself on a scrap piece of paper, maybe in his office or maybe in his bedroom at night by candlelight. And it never got into a speech, it never got into an official document. It just got organized with all of his papers after he died, and it wasn't until almost 100 years after he died that it even surfaced and got printed and people could actually find it again. So here's what he wrote. In this note, he said, he refers to the Declaration of Independence as our apple of gold, the shining moral core of our country, without which we have nothing. He called it the source of hope for all people, and the Constitution as the frame of silver that protects it and adorns it. Your pride in this country is justified. Your pride in our foundations, in our heritage, is justified. Don't let anyone take that from you. Thank you.